TDG episode 220. My name is Dave, and I'm joined by Michael.
Dave, we took 2 weeks off. It was a good 2 weeks off for me, but there was like several times during those 2 weeks that I was like, we're gonna have to record an emergency podcast.
Yeah, I told you. I gave you my schedule. I
No,
said we could do
no,
it.
no. I was just like, let's see what happens. And then Xbox kept digging themselves a grave. And it's just like, actually, give them another day because the news keeps getting worse and worse over there. But Dave, how was your time off? You got to see a kid graduate.
Yeah, so I got to see my daughter graduate with two majors. I got to go to my nephew's wedding, and I got to see my great niece, who I hadn't seen. It was only like 5 or 6 months old. So that was in the course of 4 days, 4.5 days of driving to Kentucky, moving my daughter out of a dorm room, and apparently I can barely be heard. So let's see if this is
Uh oh.
changing that. Yeah. Is that any
Well,
better?
I hear you very loud now.
Yeah, I know, because I just turned up my.
Yeah. Oh.
No, I'm still here. I'm just waiting for.
Confirmation that you're
Yeah.
audible.
Is it any better? Much better. Too loud. Okay.
We're doing it live, guys.
Yeah.
This
Well,
may or may not be edited.
lots of
We'll
updates
see.
happened while I was on vacation, so to my system, like not personal updates, but just like system software updates.
Dave always keeps his computers on, so it's just roulette every time he sits down.
Well, because I don't really once it's set up right, I don't really want to mess with it.
It's Windows, Dave. Like
Yeah.
it's always going to change and it's always going to break. But we hopefully are good.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. So I drove. We drove to Kentucky on Thursday last week. We did move my daughter out of her dorm room, and then on Friday, my daughter had two graduations with a lunch squeezed in there for a bunch of the family because my oldest son lives down there as well. So he came up with his wife and. And then our eventual soon to be grandchild that's coming at the end of this year. And then I turned 41 on Saturday. And on Saturday, I flew from Lexington to Raleigh to go to my nephew's wedding, my brother's kid's wedding. And then obviously there was Mother's Day on Sunday, which I was not with my wife because she stayed in Kentucky. And I flew back to Detroit from North Carolina on Monday morning. So it's been I'm very tired.
Yeah. But you at least weren't working too much between that, hopefully.
Yeah. No, I wasn't working. I know you had a thing going like 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, convention the first week we were off, which I would have been fine for, but I super caught the con flu,
okay.
and I was rough that first week we were off.
It's almost like your body's like, oh, you're not podcasting? Okay, you're gonna be sick.
Yeah, it's like taking all the sickness from this convention. So yeah, went to C2E2. That was super fun convention. I always love going there. Stayed at the hotel that's connected to the convention for the 3 days and just got super sick. And then it was one of those things where I was sick for about 5 days and Sarah was relatively good up until I was healthy, and then she got sick. So it's like she held on just long enough for me to recover, and then she ended up getting
become
sick
healthy
as well.
enough to take care of her. It's like she
Basically, yeah, we traded off who was going to take care of each other. But yeah, and then the following week is when you had all your adventures and stuff like that. So we needed those 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think again, I usually try to give everybody a look behind the curtains. I think this, we might have like a biannual break. Like we always take that break in late December, early January. And then I think that this may or may not become the norm for us in May or right before. June's probably going to be a crazy month. So it's just kind of one of those things where we're not going after any kind of record. We're not chasing downloads. We love our community. We love talking to you guys. And we know that some of you guys, obviously, who are up to date on the show, mentioned that you missed the show, and I apologize for that. But it's just kind of one of those things where it's kind of just good to step away for a little bit. I barely still played any games with as much as I had going on, but it was just kind of one of those things where I'm sitting at home on a Wednesday night when you were getting ready to go to C2E2 or whatever, and like I love doing this, but it was kind of like I don't have to do this tonight. Like it was it was a little bit more.
I didn't rush my dinner last week.
It was a little bit more of
I get home late.
Like a relaxing, relieving feeling, just to not worry about it. And we know that you guys know if something is warrants enough of a conversation that's even 30 minutes or more, like we're gonna do it. Like we're in the
Yeah.
month of June, we're probably gonna record 6 or 7 times if I had to guess.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Like we already agreed, like during that 2 weeks, if PlayStation dropped a showcase or something, we were just gonna just do whatever. They would have interrupted the graduation and been like,
Yeah.
I need to talk about PlayStation.
I
And
had
everyone
I
at the
had
graduation would
devices
have
with
understood.
me that if in case of emergency break class, like so.
We would just record the podcast and be like on the ground in
Yeah.
Kentucky.
At a Kentucky horse park, Dave. That's where my
Yeah.
daughter's graduation was. It was on a Kentucky horse park. So
That sounds pretty classy for
Yeah.
Kentucky.
yeah, I'll tell you what, man. That arena we were in is probably better than some arenas that some basketball teams play in across this country.
Yeah, yeah. They take care of their horses.
Yeah. All right. We are Digital Days Gaming. Obviously, we're a weekly podcast typically that posts Thursday morning, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also stream live on YouTube and Twitch Wednesday nights about 8:30, 9 o'clock Eastern time. So twitch.tv/Digital Days Gaming, youtube.com/Digital Days Gaming. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do on YouTube and Twitch. I'm not going to get into that because it sounds like we got a bunch of stuff to do. But just think about it. Amazon Prime and Twitch together gets you a free subscription. You can use that subscription on us. YouTube following or subscribing to YouTube is free, and then you can always watch the audio version. You can watch/listen to the audio version on YouTube, or you can go back to the live recast of it and watch it there. The audio version just has our Digital Days Gaming logo on it, so it's safe for you to do in the car. The YouTube version, the YouTube live channel has the replay of it, which will video, and you can see our lovely faces and everything like that. So other than that, we are going to jump into the news. Everything else that's important is linked in the show notes with our Discord server as well.
Yep. All right, Dave. We're just gonna hit like the hardest news that happened about a week and a half ago, and that is Xbox is shutting down 4 studios. So last week, Xbox is kind of out of nowhere said they are closing Arcane Austin, the developers of Redfall, Tango Gameworks, the Hi-Fi Rush developers, Alpha Dog, the Mighty Doom developers, it's a mobile game, and Roundhouse Games, the former Human Head studio. When it comes to Roundhouse Games, they're going to be folded into one of the other Bethesda studios, specifically the Elder Scrolls Online team. So it's studio closure, but with some job transfers in there, though they didn't distinguish if it's like everyone's job or if it's just some people coming over. As I mentioned, so Alpha Dog Studios will see Mighty Doom on mobile shut down in August. Roundhouse will shutter and move to the ESO team. Arcane Austin was working on fixing Redfall, but they will see their work go unfinished, including all of their post-launch content that they had planned. Players that had purchased the season pass and content via the collector's edition will be given a make good, which is likely refunds. I hope it's refunds. Make good was a weird way to phrase things.
It'll
but
be
I'm
Microsoft
assuming,
credit.
I hope not.
That's what it'll be.
Especially for the people that bought like the collector's edition. It's just like that gets weird because it's like you may have bought that collector's edition from Best Buy or Target.
That's why it'll be store credit. Like that's why it'll be Microsoft store credit because they'll see that you logged in. I think you had to make an account with Redfall when you logged in a Bethesda account. They'll see that you've purchased it. You had the version, and they'll give you like I don't know $40 for Microsoft store credit.
Yeah, Tango Gameworks is shutting down after their last game, Hi-Fi Rush, won several end-of-year awards and was considered a commercial success for the studio, or at least that's what Xbox was telling us for about a year, that a Hi-Fi Rush worked out well for them. A day after the studio shut down, Xbox execs, I believe it was Matthew Booty, basically said hey, in a town hall meeting, we really need to focus on smaller award-winning style games, which just came across very misguided of just well, what about that studio that won you awards and made a small game? So we'll talk about it. There seems to be a lot of mixed messaging going on in Xbox. They're kind of talking out of both sides. Tango Gameworks were in the process of pitching a sequel to Hi-Fi Rush before they were, I guess, denied. Xbox sounds like they're kind of shifting some gears in many different directions. One of the things that apparently was brought up is potentially asking studios to look into making smaller games that can be released quicker than AAA games usually are released and how much they usually cost. Several reports indicate that Xbox is currently kind of in some turmoil. Turmoil might be a strong term, but it's basically Microsoft is starting to want to see a return on the investment of the $80 billion that was spent for Activision and Bethesda. Other reports coming out of that, I didn't have the bullet point. I'm losing it. There currently is there might be major turmoil over this one thing, and that is the debate on what to do with Call of Duty this year. There's some people internally that want that on Game Pass day one, and then there's other people that are saying we would lose too much money because there have been leaks of information that basically is showing that, like, if you put your game on Game Pass on PC, your PC sales do suffer. And it's kind of the opposite on Xbox, where Game Pass doesn't really seem to affect too hard like the sales of an Xbox game. As we saw with Starfield. Starfield sold pretty well physically despite being on Game Pass, but when it comes to PC, seems like it's Game Pass or bust for PC players. Dave, a lot of stuff just thrown at you. We've had about a week to think about all this stuff, but initial thoughts on...
I'm not sure if people are going to like my answers, but Pete Hines is the smartest man in the room right now.
Yeah, he kind of left like a year and a half ago. And was
so all I'm saying is that he sold for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that... Do I think Pete Hines is smarter than Microsoft or Phil Spencer? No. Do I think that Pete Hines, who had been at Bethesda for God knows how long, saw the problems and saw the long-term trajectory and tried to figure out what they could do, and he knew the value of what he had. I'm starting to think that a lot of these companies that have been purchased by, whether it's Sony or Embracer Group or Microsoft, I feel like some of these companies have fleeced them. The purchasee, not the purchaser, the ones being purchased, sold them a bill of goods that maybe they couldn't deliver on, or after they got their money, they let their foot off the gas. I'm not saying that developers are being lazy, but just because Hi-Fi Rush sold well doesn't mean that studio still wasn't bleeding money. And I think that's more or less what's going on, is that like Microsoft board gave Phil like 2 years and said, okay. And after 2 years, they're starting to look at the individual's numbers, to where the board then assigned one of their bookkeepers to Bethesda and started digging into Bethesda's books and says, what the fuck is this? Like,
there are certain things that there's so many different things to look at, so many different angles to look at with this. When it comes to Tango Gameworks, I think it is misguided to shut that studio down, but it's also a studio that wasn't really built for a game like Hi-Fi Rush. They were built behind the director of that studio, Mikame, who left a year prior. But they made Sole Suspect. They made like third person, like dark mystery sort of games, and they lost basically 2 of their creative directors or higher ups in the last like 2-3 years. And commercially, while their games have been beloved, I'm talking about Sole Suspect and Ghostwire Tokyo to a lesser extent, they weren't big financial hits. But that studio was built for that size of game. So being pitched another Hi-Fi Rush maybe just didn't work out Microsoft book-wise, of like, hey, we built this studio to make these gigantic AAA games, not gigantic, but like large AAA games, and you're pitching us another small title. Like, does the headcount justify, that sort of game? That is questionable, especially losing the directors and stuff like that. I think it is still misguided because Hi-Fi Rush was something to build upon.
I agree.
And closing the studio definitely seems short-sighted.
How long did it take for them to make it? This is becoming more and more of a pain point in the gaming industry that we've seen over the last couple of years. How long games are taking to be made, and then what's your return on investment? What's your ROI? So to your point, yeah, like maybe Tango Gameworks is built to make a big game, so now they're pitching a Hi-Fi Rush 2 sequel,
and then the
question from Microsoft is how long, and then they tell them like, oh well, typically our lead time is this, and they're like, well, it's a smaller game, and we don't know if how long, or if they were working on Hi-Fi Rush before the purchase. So like, and it seems like that was kind of a passion project amongst a small team in there that turned out to be really good. But I just think that there comes a certain point in time, and we've been talking like the way that Game Pass is sustainable is with continuous content, and they were able to for a while patch that or hold that sustainability with third party, but that was getting expensive too. And I still think the value is there. Like, I still think that the profitability of Game Pass is there. You guys that are listening to me can disagree with me all you want, and I'll still stand on the hill. I don't know. We don't know the metrics behind how much it costs to keep Game Pass running, how much the server connectivity costs. I get all that, but the amount of money, based on 30 million users times $10 a month, and that's lowballing it, is absurd. I mean, and that doesn't include selling.
But when you spend $80 billion, that's
yep.
where Microsoft's at right now.
That's where the penny pinchers of a successful multi-cajillion-dollar corporation are like, like you have a 24-month window, and then you got to start showing some cash. Like that's where some of that is coming from. Do I think Spencer's in trouble? No. They just promoted Sarah Bond. I
think we're getting to the point where I don't know if he's like in super trouble, but I feel like his leash is going to be a little tighter based on some of the reports we're getting from Microsoft being like, we need money now, which means he needs to pivot some of his ideas. And that's where I think we're getting like the multiple, we'll talk about a little bit later, but right now, after they closed the 4 studios, we had statements from Sarah Bond, Matthew Booty, and Phil Spencer, and those statements all were a little different, and some of them conflicted with each other, which makes everything seem a little more chaotic. Because when they closed the studios during the town hall, they're like, hey, we want to allocate our resources elsewhere, which is why they're closing the studios, and we want to put resources into safer bets. And then at the same time, they're like, we want to like produce like games a little bit quicker, and maybe some smaller games, and that kind of conflicts with like putting all your resources into like
but that's
a few things.
That's why I think Bethesda was if you picture Bethesda as a ship, it had a lot of holes in it that were causing it to sink slowly, and I feel Microsoft and Phil Spencer thought that they could patch some of these holes and keep it afloat longer, and now they determined that they need to drop weight to get the ship to float.
I agree with you on that, but I feel like they meant to drop this quote unquote weight long ago.
Yeah.
But the Activision Blizzard stuff, they had to put on a big show and lie to the government basically of like, hey, everyone's safe if they join us, and
we
don't worry.
Probably would. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. We probably never would have saw Hi-Fi Rush if they weren't trying to purchase Microsoft Activision. I like, now that you say that like verbally, and it kind of clicked in my head, they probably would have cut the fat a long time ago. Like they're
they would have looked at these studios, like especially after Mikami left.
Yeah.
Tango Gameworks, they were probably like, well, your head just left.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, your second command, I forget what her name was that did Ghostwire Tokyo. That was supposed to be the next heir to Tango Gameworks, and they left as well.
And don't get it twisted. These high ups, these top 4 to 6 people in each of these studios got a big bag when this purchase happened.
Yeah.
Pete Hines didn't take all the money, but everybody that's the head of each one of these studios got a significant percentage of this money.
Yeah, it just didn't trickle down to the lower
which
developers.
Sucks, but I don't know if they have profit sharing. I don't know if they have, any of that stuff. But you're the head CEO, director of a studio. You were taken care of, and that's why you see a lot of people leaving. And that's why circling all the way back to the Sony acquisition. I don't know if we heard anything about it through the Bethesda acquisition, but Sony buying Bungie, the retention clauses, like they had to stay there.
It's a good thing you brought that up. Is Microsoft apparently is having Xbox go to Bethesda people and seeing if they can take early retirement or severance. Like they're trying to cut as much possible, and that again is going to tie into Microsoft basically asking, but Xbox, we need to see some return on our investment. And right now, Xbox is at the point, due to potential like poor leadership and poor decisions in terms of how they manage their studios, isn't possible any other way than to cut jobs and studios because they can't produce games fast enough in order to like make Microsoft happy. But what they can do is unfortunately lay people off and close studios because
Right.
that will instantly free up money. And that's all Microsoft wants right now from
Yep.
Xbox.
Labor is the number one most instantaneously impactful and seen cost cut that
Yeah.
you can see benefit the most. Now, circling back to something else you said, I think that they would be foolish to not put Call of Duty on Game Pass. 110% foolish. I think the game will sell. It will sell just as it will sell just as much as it has prior, and they will see an increase in users on Game Pass because I think people will pay $10 or $15 to try it out to see if they like it. And in terms of what Microsoft board wants is to see an instantaneous increase spiked in revenue. You will see that in the month of November through sales and Game Pass subscriptions.
How disruptive would it be to do the old like pay to play it early thing, but it's like you can play Call of Duty day one if you spend $70, but if you wait 30 days, it's on Game Pass.
I mean, I would almost see that kind of be the reverse. I would see you can play it on Game Pass on day one, but you can play it 7 days early or 10 days early on if you purchase the game.
Yeah.
Like I could see that. I could see certain similar to Pal World. I could see two kind of different versions of the game. Similar to the back in the day with the Sony stuff, where I think Sony had like a 90-day early access to maps or 30-day early access to maps, to where the Game Pass version of it doesn't get the maps right away. Doesn't like there? It's definitely it's hey, here's a reason to buy it, but if you don't want to buy it, it'll be on Game Pass in this form, which will be a full form after the first 12 months.
Yeah.
But it'll be a better form for the purchase copy.
You know the meme of the person like freaking out and they're trying to figure out what button to press?
Yeah.
I feel like that's Phil Spencer right now, Microsoft being like, we need money now and we need Game Pass to grow at the same time.
Yep.
And those being two completely separate entities right now.
Let's be real. Like
when it comes to Call of Duty.
Like we've talked about this for years. The Call of Duty bro and the Madden guy. Okay? Like that's a if you really break down, even people that listen to this show, if you really break down a average gamer that's anywhere from the age of, I don't even know at this point in time, 25 to 55. Okay? They're probably not going to subscribe to Game Pass, and they're just going to spend the $70 to $100 on Call of Duty every year because that's what they do. It's my husband's birthday in October. Here you go. I pre-ordered you Call of Duty. You go, like that's the norm. Here's your Madden game. Here's your Call of Duty game. And that's, I feel like 70% of Call of Duty's sales is that person. The 30% is the people similar, like the rest of it is similar on a basis to you and I, where we kind of check it out, we dabble with it, we subscribe to Game Pass, we've got multiple platforms, and those things too. And then I think there's a small dynamic in there where it'll be like, hey, don't buy Call of Duty this year. I have Game Pass. I'm good.
Yeah, I would say like for PlayStation it won't matter. Like they're buying $70 day one no matter what. The Xbox install base is still relatively small, so I feel like that doesn't matter. I feel like it's going to come down to that PC player base, and where I think the hard choice is the PC player base. This is going to sound bad, but they tend to be a smarter, more informed consumer.
They know about Game Pass. They know about Green Man Gaming. They know about like CD keys.
So that's where it becomes difficult for Phil Spencer to decide.
PC players don't pay full price for anything.
No, I know, and that's the thing. though, is it's just like he's looking at that and is probably like, do I cannibalize the PC market with Game Pass? Yeah. And Game Pass is cheaper on PC than it is on.
But that same PC player, if they're not on Game Pass, is not going to go to Microsoft Store to buy it. They're going to want it on Steam.
Yeah, but the thing is, they will do Game Pass for a month or something to play it and then cancel out, because we know there's a ton of people that buy Call of Duty and bail out before the first expansion comes out or whatever, or the map pack. So like I feel like the decision's coming down to like, what do they do on PC?
Right. So I agree with you 100% on there's people that play Call of Duty for 30 or 60 days and then walk away. Like that happens all the time. That happens all the time with a lot of $70, $60 games, whether it's Uncharted, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, you can go on and on and on, Spider-Man, whatever. But I think, and whether you like this or don't like this, the business practice of this is what the hope is that person that is like, oh, I really only play Call of Duty for 30 or 60 days. I'll just get Game Pass for a month. The hope is that they forget to cancel their subscription, and then it just keeps going.
Yeah,
and then they get the $70 either way.
I feel like that would be the ideal thing that Microsoft would want to bank on, or Xbox would want to bank on, if Microsoft wasn't telling them like, you spent $80 billion last year.
Right. But so what do you think the board wants to see, though? Like, what if Phil Spencer goes up to the board on January 1st of 2025 and they start asking him about Call of Duty, what do you think the Microsoft board wants to see? An increase in Game Pass subscriptions or the best-selling Call of Duty ever? Because it won't be both.
Dave, what if I told you the board doesn't know what the fuck they want? They just want to see a thing go up. And regardless if it's Game Pass go up, sales go down, they're then going to be pissed sales went down. If sales go up, Game Pass goes down, they're going to be pissed that Game Pass went down. Mm-hmm. There's no winning when you're a publicly traded company, and that's where Xbox currently sees themselves stuck in.
Right.
Is if they were a private business, this wouldn't be an issue. We wouldn't be even having this discussion.
Do you want $70 on November of 2024, or do you want potentially 15 times 12 for the year of 2025, and a Microsoft
65
account,
and a 65-year-old dude who goes to private islands to do horrible things is going to be like both.
Yeah,
because they're not used to being told one or the other. And that is the problem you have when it comes to
because I got a
dealing with
like
board of directors.
You really can't walk into a store and just buy Adobe.
You can buy a piece of paper, I think.
Yeah. But you're buying a subscription.
Yeah. But like I think that's why Microsoft is like, or not Microsoft. Microsoft's fine. They're $1 trillion company.
Yeah.
Xbox is going to be in a weird spot to where like Phil Spencer, I think he is in a little bit of trouble, but trouble for someone that well off is like he gets moved to a different part of Microsoft.
Yeah.
They move Sarah Bond or Matthew Booty up to his spot to get their head chopped off, basically. Mm-hmm. You know, like Phil Spencer is going to be fine.
It's going to be
like,
a reshuffling of the cards, but they're still the same cards.
Yeah. They'll just move someone up to then take the brunt of, the force of, the consequences.
I think, publicly, I think it's a mistake and Spencer did it for years. Like, and he did a very, very good job of it, and people still criticize him for it to this, but I applaud him for it. Phil Spencer was the face and the voice of Xbox for years. And I mean this in the nicest way possible. Allowing Sarah Bond, and Matt Booty to talk while you're talking at the same time is a mistake. Without getting your messages to be the same, but then they'd get criticized for just making them out to be voice puppets of Phil. So like again, they're in a no-win situation, and the only win I see is that Phil should be the only one that talks.
Or he steps aside and lets them do their thing. Because right now is the thing that we saw last week where we got 3 different voices and they were on the same page maybe 50-60% of the time.
Yeah. The only time that all 3 of them should be talking at the same time is if they're on the same stage.
Yeah. And it should be, and now here's Sarah, and now here's Matthew. Like it should be one of those situations. I don't know. They're definitely in a weird spot. We knew there was issues. I mean, back when like the Activision stuff was happening, and those Bethesda emails were released.
It goes all the way back to why would Bethesda let themselves get bought? This is why the 10-year plan didn't look good.
And Microsoft would have been given all of this information and then their due diligence because legally you have to. Mm-hmm. And Microsoft was probably like, cool, the Fallout and Elder Scrolls IP. Mm-hmm. And Bethesda, cool. And then we'll just cut what we don't want later. But then the Activision became available. And then they're like, well, shit, we got to be on our good, best behavior. And now we're dealing with that. The only thing that's scary is like, it went from like Xbox is like, oh my God, they can revive so many IPs to Xbox might be the biggest IP graveyard by the end of this.
I mean,
because we're hearing a lot of rough stuff about like how their studios are functioning.
I mean, look at what Embracer's doing. Look at what just happened to Embracer. They spent all this money and then they got their legs cut off. It's the hypocrisy in the video game industry though. Like they're blaming the public is blaming Microsoft for these Bethesda closures, but nobody blames Sony for the Bungie layoffs.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, I hate to always use that as an example, but that's another, another angle of Bungie that I personally, objectively pay as much attention to as I can. Of, okay, like, I want to
There
know
was a lot of people upset that Insomniac had layoffs during,
Yeah.
like that stuff, and
but but I just don't, like you took the story out, but Sony's doing the same shit. Like they're
the
sitting
story
there.
is still in there. We'll talk about that
Okay.
towards the end. I took out the Suicide Squad stuff.
Oh no, but I meant the requiring the PSN account sign on. The Helldivers.
Oh
2
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And that's
that whole
affecting
thing.
Ghost of Tsushima now. Like Ghost of Tsushima is not purchasable like in 70 countries.
I think it's 100.
Yeah, I
It's
was
some
gonna say
crazy, yeah.
117, but that didn't sound right.
Yeah.
But like they're they should have. Okay, it's not in here, but Sony should have required the PSN connection when Helldivers 2 launched.
There was mention of it in the description of the game, I believe,
Yeah.
and it just
And then
was
they tried,
forgotten
when they
about,
saw how
yeah.
many users they had on it, they went back and they want to show their version of Game Pass, their version of engagement. They want to show that off as well, which is why they're requiring the PSN connection, connectivity to it, because we just talked a couple weeks ago about, you can start earning trophies on PC. Like they're doing the same thing that Microsoft is doing, and they're not getting the finger pointed at them. And
they did with Helldivers, to be
yeah.
fair.
Well, they fired the community manager over it too. Sony, like the Helldivers community manager lost his job because he's the one that said to review bomb him. And then Helldivers has the audacity to make a cape in the game in the same
And that's a
logo
boss
of
move. Like, but literally, the head of Arrowhead Studios was like, "This isn't us. Go complain at PlayStation."
yeah.
And it worked, and they got it undone.
Yep. But I mean, now it's going to be required on Ghost of Tsushima. Like, it should have been required from the start. If I want to play a Ubisoft game, I got to make a Ubisoft account. If I want to play a Ubisoft game on Game Pass, I got to make a Ubisoft account.
But the problem is with that is PlayStation. It's almost like they forgot.
Yep, they
that
did.
PSN wasn't available in 100+ countries. Therefore, it wouldn't be for sale.
Because they want to show their board growth. They just came out of their quarter earnings and said that they're more focused on playtime than they are on sales now.
Yeah, because they need to show a thing going up. And the funny thing is about with the PlayStation thing is just how successful Helldivers was to show that they were just like, let's jump on this as fast as we can. And the lack of foresight of like, they legitimately were like, oh, don't worry, you played the game for 2 months, people on PC, you got your money's worth. And it wasn't until Steam started to initiate refunds that they were like, oh shit, we can't keep the money. And then they backtracked. If Steam allowed them to follow the 2-hour gameplay refund rule, I don't think they would have reversed it. But because Steam was like, you know what? No, everyone could get refunded if you can't sign into PSN. And we would have been having a completely different discussion of like how crazy PlayStation was for doing that. But because Steam made them accountable for their actions, they backtracked.
Because Steam is also annoyed with Sony because Sony's trying to negotiate their way onto a better revenue split with Steam.
Yeah, and also Steam just tends to this is what Steam does. Like as much as we can give shit to Valve.
Yeah, we don't need you, you need us.
Yeah. But in some instances, it benefits the player, and this was one of those times. And that's basically what happened with Ghost of Tsushima. They're like, "Oh, hey, we don't want a Helldivers issue," and basically like, "Hey, if you're advertising this product on Steam as a single player and multiplayer game, but these people can't access the multiplayer, then you can't sell this game." It's almost to the point where PlayStation might have to consider just breaking Ghost into 2 games just to sell it in that 100+ countries.
Or what is inevitably going to happen more likely in the next 2 to 3 years.
No PSN.
Well, no. More PSN is one of 2 ways. I think it'll be more PSN sign-ons. They'll somehow figure out how to make PSN work in these countries that it can't work in. They'll do some workaround with it. Or they'll make their own store. They'll make their own PC, PSN, PC Play Store.
Again, they would still need to make PSN available in those countries.
Right, or you just can't download it in your country, and then they don't run into this issue of like you can't even get the PlayStation PC game store in Nicaragua. I don't know.
But Steam's basically doing that now of blocking the game from being sold in those countries.
Right.
But PlayStation was still like, no, sell it in those countries. It's fine. they're paying full price for this product that they're only getting half of.
Yeah,
Like,
but to your point, they would have to be like Ghost of Tsushima SP and Ghost of Tsushima
no, and
MP.
that's basically what Valve would have to force them to do if Valve was going to be like, yes, actually, you can sell those games in those countries. But Valve's like, no, if you're not doing that, you're just not going to sell the game in that country, period. But yeah, we'll move on. Xbox is a mess. I have no idea what they plan to do in about a month when they talk about all the games that they're developing and how. If you're Jeff Keighley and this is going to be your biggest summer game fest, are you at least a little bit like annoyed or just like worried that like these companies are going to have to go out on your stage and act like they didn't lay off most of their employees at a certain point? Because Xbox is going to have to go out there and be like, if Xbox puts out another developer direct style thing, it's going to look fucking terrible. Like, what is it?
But they still have a business to run.
They still have a business to run, but I'm just saying they're better off going back to that like shitty
trailer reel
as opposed to having Phil Spencer come out with a t-shirt of like a game he might be hinting at.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
You know, or being like, hey, now let's talk to the developers, because now I'm just going to imagine that developer interviews happening. And behind the camera is like Phil Spencer with like a machete, being like, tell us how great Xbox is
like
to developers.
Like the photos on Mother's Day with the mom taking photos of the kids. Y'all better smile.
Basically, yeah. Like that's what I'm going to picture if they do a developer talking head talking about how great Xbox is or Bethesda. Like, it's going to be a fucking wild thing. Also, Hellblade releases next week, Dave. Do you know that? Like, they're not advertising that game at all.
I've seen some advertisements for that.
I've seen some very direct advertisements, but like,
I feel like I don't care about that game. So
I care about the game, and I am not seeing it marketed enough for one of the marquee games this year, and also one of the studios that is beloved, but also going into Hellblade 2, fans of that game know it's not going to be a gigantic commercial success.
To be fair,
people are like, what do you do with Ninja Theory?
In general is very weird in 2024. I didn't know Hades 2 was out.
It's technically early access.
Doesn't matter. If people are playing it, I didn't know.
Yeah. Because it's early access. The people that know are the ones that are interested in that sort of thing. But Hellblade, I feel like they're not really doing much to advertise that game. And now I'm worried about Ninja Theory. Because that seems like an expensive game that the return on investment, even with a lot of marketing, I don't really see that return being that big. But yeah, we'll move on to the next story. Ubisoft announced Assassin's Creed Shadows and also at the same time canceled The Division Heartland. So Ubisoft announced a new AC game, Assassin's Creed Shadows, coming this November. The game will take place in feudal Japan and feature 2 protagonists. In a financial call, or whatever you would want to call it, Ubisoft said The Division Heartland has been canceled. The team working on that game will now assist with Rainbow Six and X Defiance. Dave, we were talking about what are they going to do with Heartland. We were hoping maybe some Summer Game Fest news or Ubisoft Forward news, but just straight up canceled.
Yeah, I mean, we never saw it. I mean, they showed us a logo for it and everything like that, but we never saw it. So I would always been hesitant about that. I've seen the mobile game. Now I'm more curious about what the status of the mobile game is after this. But that's also 2 completely different like studios, companies, or not companies, but 2 completely different studios. A mobile game studio versus Heartland, which was a console / PC game studio. Them going to Rainbow Six is a little interesting, but then X Defiant is not, because they took them so hard to get X Defiant out, and I think
coming soon.
Yeah, next week.
Yep. Coming soon.
I think that they saw the similar trajectory for Heartland that they saw for X Defiant and said, nope, pull the plug now. Like, I think there has to be, something to where they're like, we're not doing this again, because they had put so much time, effort, and energy into X Defiant, and in return had not put as much time, effort, and energy into Heartland. I've played X Defiant. You've played X Defiant. I've done press interviews for X Defiant. So they've done a ton of market. I haven't done anything for Heartland other than I know it exists or it existed.
Yeah. The effort was definitely put in by the development studio.
Yes,
We just don't know
100%,
how
yes.
far along it has been. I just threw that in there in case
Yep.
anyone
Yeah.
misunderstands. But yeah, no, I
There was
agree.
a
They
point of
haven't.
no return with X Defiant,
Yeah.
and they did
And
not,
Heartland
they,
might
they
not
had
have
not
been
gotten to that point with Heartland. So,
Or it could have been the thing that I theorized when they announced like 3 or 4
too much division.
games. Yeah. Or just games in this style in general were like, hey, we're going to do competitive shooters and extraction games. I always thought Heartland was like, oh, do you really want to release Heartland and X Defiant around the same time? Because originally that's where they were slated, is to kind of almost compete against
with
each
the
other.
Division mobile game, along with Division 3 in development allegedly, and along with a Division Netflix series. Like, how much are you going to like shove down these people's throats right now? To where if the Netflix series is good, it will help the stuff that of the Division that's already out and good. Like we've seen it with Fallout, we've seen it with Last of Us, we've seen it with multiple, hell, probably even Twisted Metal at some point in time saw a server increase on other stuff.
They almost made a Twisted Metal game
Yeah,
because of the Twisted Metal series.
So I mean, we've seen the success of it, and you know, it's just there's just an oversaturation right now of a lot of things, and we're
especially if you're on Ubisoft.
Yeah,
like,
and from the oversaturation, we're seeing overcorrection, and post overcorrection means, unfortunately, cutbacks and layoffs.
Yeah. And in this case, they're moving that studio around to work on the other games, because Rainbow Six has to have something else cooking. Like, I believe the article I linked to said Siege specifically, but I still feel like if you're adding another studio to that,
Yeah,
you might have some more things coming to Siege. And that, regardless of how you feel about Division, but if you're in charge of Ubisoft and you're like, cool, we'll release X Defiant, and then we have Heartland coming. How soon can we get the next Rainbow Six Siege game out there? And if that studio says really soon, you're going to look at X Defiant and Heartland and be like, one of you have to go.
Yeah.
Because Rainbow Six is way more important.
Mm-hmm.
Or Siege specifically.
I mean, we've talked about like a PvE Rainbow Six game would probably do phenomenal. Like a PvE Rainbow Six games as a service would, going, like, what was it? Rainbow Six Patriot, like years ago, that never came out.
Oh yeah, that's the one you always hard to. I mean, Extraction looked good.
Yeah.
At a certain point, and then it came out and it wasn't good. But yeah, no, Ubisoft is definitely overcorrecting at this point because they kind of got a little, like every company, got a little too games as a service happy at a certain point. I mean, Hyperscape is an example of that. So they're at least pulling the plug on Heartland before it turns into a Hyperscape, where you get it this close to launching and then you realize like you need to pull back. Speaking of pulling back, Square Enix is shifting gears. So Square Enix laid out their new strategy to turn their financials around. They reported some financial numbers and their stock immediately dropped 16% because they're kind of stagnant across the board. Don't blame any Avengers for losing a shit ton of money in certain points. Like, stop. The main takeaway from this new strategy is they were going to aggressively pursue multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs. The strategy is supposed to be a short-term 3-year strategy. Because of this news, Square Enix have canceled several projects that don't align with this new strategy, and they'll be laying developers off across America and Europe in the publishing and indie development arms of their company. But basically, this is Square Enix being like, hey, you know how we were doing like console exclusive games? Shit is not working out for us financially. And now they are backtracking on that and will be a multi-platform studio or company publisher from here on out. Dave, sounds like Square Enix basically enjoyed getting that money up front for the console exclusive, but then soon realized that that wasn't enough money to sustain.
Square Enix is just a very poorly ran corporation, in my opinion.
It is.
And this screams, they're seeing the increase in the PC player base, and they go, I want that market. That's what this is coming down to. This is not about Xbox. This is not about Switch. This is about PC.
Well, I would say it could be a little bit about Switch, because they
not on some of the games they're talking about. Like Final Fantasy 16 can't run on the Switch.
No, but they have put a lot of effort into producing like several successful RPGs on the Switch.
Yeah.
And those games do sell well on the Switch. Switch has a
Right,
huge
but they
install
would
base.
also do well on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're looking at that of like, that's lost revenue.
Mhm.
Like, that's lost revenue.
Now I don't know how much money Nintendo gives them for that, or if Square just goes, "Oh, we just want to release it on the Switch," and somebody's probably like, "Stop doing that. Like, stop just making something for the Switch. Why can't that game that we know runs on the Switch run on PS5?"
Yeah, we don't know exactly how exactly that partnership works, but like Square Enix has been releasing like 2 Switch exclusive RPGs a year for the last like 5 years.
Why do Final Fantasy 10, 11, or 12 remakes and only put them on Switch?
Why
Which I don't think they did
started
that, but that's just an example.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Octopath Traveler, like 2 is now on all the platforms, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things where they weren't expecting Octopath Traveler to be as successful as it was as a Switch exclusive. And then they were probably like, shit, we could have released this on other platforms and made even more money, because that's where the good Square Enix games are like these exclusives to Switch. And then the problem is with their exclusives to PlayStation is they cost a shit ton of money to produce. And there is a thing that happened.
I don't think this is going to solve their problem, though. Again,
no, it's not, because they need
to cut you off, but them releasing Final Fantasy 16 on Xbox or PC isn't going to fix the sales problem. Or
no, but it won't fix all the issues, but it is one of those things where it will at least earn them a little bit more money. Yeah. It sounds like basically they regret making some of these deals because they got that money early on to develop the games, but then when it came time to making that money back, it just wasn't making it fast enough. And they also made poor decisions in terms of partnering with like some like third-party studios to produce games like Final Fantasy Paradise something, The Stranger or whatever it was called. Foam Stars didn't seem like that actually turned out to be an okay game, but it didn't really make sense. Outriders was a game that like
sold well, but
like didn't really have the support, and also wasn't a full Square Enix title. Of course, the Avengers thing, they're gonna blame that until the fucking world ends. But that's also, it wasn't a Crystal Dynamics problem. It was a Square Enix problem for doing that. Square Enix now is at the point though where they sold all of their American and Western studios to where they can no longer blame those studios. So like the next 3 years, Square can only blame themselves for whatever happens to them.
Because they'll blame NFTs. So
they probably will, and that's also where a lot of their money was going to. What was like NFT shit at a certain point. But do you think this is like a good plan for Square Enix as a company that is poorly run right now?
I think it's an obvious plan. It's a path of least resistance direction. You know, it's like, okay, just make it run on everything and let's see what happens.
Yeah. Just we put it out on all platforms.
Can it run
on PS3? Funny though.
Do it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be all in favor. It is funny though. If they didn't have a new CEO, I would feel like it would be someone being like, "Hey, I can solve the problem I created," and give me credit for solving the problem I created. But this is basically the new CEO having to just clean up all the mistakes that the previous one made. And right now, the only thing Square Enix has going for it is Final Fantasy 14 and the small RPGs that they release on the Switch. Like everything else has been like a dumpster fire for them. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. All right, we'll move into our PlayStation portion of the news. Concord is coming this year for PlayStation. So PlayStation, during a very healthy financial call that featured news that Helldivers is one of the best launches ever and has sold over 12 million copies, PlayStation is getting ready to launch another live service game this year, which is Concord. Concord will be out sometime this year, and a PC version was mentioned for the title during the call. Dave, this isn't the most glamorous way to announce a game, but it sounds like they needed something to say to financial investors during the call. Concord this year. We still don't know exactly what it is. We know it's a shooter.
Right. It's like,
PvP.
I mean, that's all we know of it. They'll never tell us, just like they never told us PS4 to PS4 Pro sales. But I don't know, Michael, tell me if I'm stretching, but 70% PC to 30% console for Helldivers 2?
I could see that. I feel like.
based on I'm kind of using Steam concurrent player count for that
Yeah,
reasoning, or Steam active player count. Maybe on the little high end, 60-40, maybe, like, but more sold on PC than on PlayStation. Like, whether you like it or don't like it, more people play this game on PC than on PlayStation.
Yeah, no, it was a huge game, and it is one of the best selling PlayStation games of all time now at hitting 12 million. Like,
right.
I think it's in the top 25 or something like that, all time PlayStation games.
And the crazy part is, it's like they own Sony owns the IP, but they don't own the studio.
And I would say they would want to acquire the studio, but after a little kerfuffle over PSN.
So I mean, kudos to them. I mean, this shows you, like, even what I feel like my perspective is, Helldivers is losing Steam, not losing Steam platform, but losing, like, players and people playing it as much as they were playing it.
Part of the reason is because fucking PlayStation kind of fucked it up with that. Like, I
agree.
Fuck.
It does. I guess I know I've been kind of ripping on them a little bit and kind of being a little insensitive, but I do feel for the Concord studio that their game kind of got said it's coming out this year without them getting to, which more likely was going to be at a PlayStation showcase in June. They probably would have spent 15 minutes on it, because this
I guess now
be their September-October game, I would assume.
Yeah, because they said there's no returning IPs this year. Like, it's just they're releasing new IP games, and Concord is probably the only one.
Yeah, and then the Twitterverse or whatever freaking out about PS5's hardware sales declining year over year. Like, no shit. Like, it's like it can't go up forever. So like eventually you run out of people to buy consoles for, and your consoles aren't breaking, so it's like you're not going to keep buying them. So, like,
it is lining up with the PS4 trajectory. So
it's doing that. It's as, in my mind, it's as expected. So I'm not tripping about that. But yeah, like, and obviously a PC version for Concord, and I would assume that, circling back to our earlier conversation, this is going to require a PSN sign-on.
Yeah, probably they'll just get it out of the way now. If they make it optional, that would be amazing.
If it is a 70-30 split, like I'm projecting for Helldivers, like, that's a lot of users that Sony can't talk about talk about publicly, of like how many active players they have, But
if they have a better, like, microtransaction, I know we don't like talking about that thing, than Helldivers has, it could be worth it to them to, like, depending on how this game is being built out.
Right.
Because Helldivers
all I was saying is that Helldivers has a ton of players. We know it has a ton of players.
Yeah.
But Sony can't track them.
They can track them, but not to the point.
Not how they want to track them.
Yeah. So they can track them, but they can't get that personal data that they desperately would want. But if Concord is built in a way that it's like trying to push season passes, microtransactions, something Helldivers really isn't as a $40 product.
Yep.
Like, say Concord's like free to play, PlayStation might be willing to not have the PSN stuff as long as the game's got a healthy stream of revenue.
I'm just saying that because they can't, Sony can't email those Helldivers players when there's an update in 6 months and say, hey, we haven't played in a little while.
You know what's funny? You know how easy it would have been for PlayStation to tell PC players, hey, if you sign up for PSN, we'll give you some fucking loot. Or a special cape.
Yep.
And no one would have complained. They probably would have got the signups from the same people that were trying to change.org them. It would have been hilarious, but
here's a PSN themed cape. Thank you.
Yeah. Instead, Helldivers are putting a cape of the review bomb out there, which I love that.
More
I love that move
power to the consumer. I love the consumer forcing the change. Like, kudos to them. Just as fast as they review bombed it, they went back and cleaned them up. You can look at the graph and you can see it go. So they stuck to their word. A lot of times you see a game get review bombed because it has a female lead or it has a gay character. Not a proper reason to review bomb a game. This you irritated.
This is one of the few justified review
you
bombing
irritated
situations.
your players base that spent money on your game. We see tons of people try to review bomb games that they didn't spend any money on, and I hate that. But this one, kudos to the player for, showing that they can do some damage if they want to. So,
All right, the last story, which we might just do news this week. We might have to
Yeah.
skip playing and watching, Dave. The last story is Sony names Jim Ryan's replacements. So PlayStation will have not one but two CEOs to replace Jim Ryan. Excuse me while I correct my grammar. Herman Host and Hideki Nishino will be co-CEOs starting in June. Herman Host will become the CEO of the new studio business group, responsible for all PlayStation game content, as well as bringing its franchise to new mediums such as film and television. Hideki Nashino will be appointed CEO of SIE's platform business group, which will see him responsible for technology, products, services, platform experience, as well as third-party publisher and developer relations and commercial operations, including sales and marketing, hardware, services, and peripherals, as well as PSN. Both of them will be reporting to the Sony chairman. I forget his name, Todoroki.
Right.
They'll be reporting to him. So it's kind of like a three-headed thing going on over at PlayStation, but they are going with the co-CEO route for PlayStation right now. Dave, initial response to
Not knowing anything about where's his name?
the second guy,
Yeah,
Hideki.
Hideki's background. And knowing what
He's
I
been
know,
there a while.
yeah, knowing what I know about Holst's background is I don't think I want Herman Holst talking about hardware. He is a developer, so I
Yeah.
want him talking about games and why it's fun and what's cool and what they're doing. And I want this dude to come on the stage and be like 44 teraflops and it's pink.
Yeah.
So like, I would equate this to Layden and House.
Yeah, and that was back when Layden was North America, House was Europe, and then I forgot Kataragi.
Yeah.
No.
But I felt like Layden got to announce the cool games, and House got to talk about, like, when you knew when Andrew
numbers
House came on
were
the
going
stage,
up.
you knew there was like a pie chart on the screen. When
Yeah,
Layden
it was
came
either
out on
pie
stage, there was
chart-
a trailer.
Yeah. Yeah. It was either Pie Chart or Kojima.
Right.
Like,
And now that
did
could have
for
had
House.
that could have had to do with like we were in the U.S., so Layden got to pick the cool stuff in the U.S. But I even feel like when Sony had a presence in Europe, like House wasn't on there going, "Here's God of War." Like he didn't. That wasn't his thing. He was the business guy in the tux, and Layden's in the jorts and the cutoff tee, going, "Hey man, let's play some games." Like
Yeah.
So I think it's a very similar system to this, and I ultimately, I guess I'm okay with it. I mean, Holst has been the head of some amazing games.
He's been head of PlayStation Studios for the last 3-4 years.
Yeah, but I meant he's spearheaded all of Killzone, Horizon. Like,
yeah, I've met Herman Host and talked to him 2 times, and he seems like a grounded individual who's passionate. When I talked to him, he was in Killzone 2, Killzone 3 days, so he was super involved with Guerrilla at that point because he was the head of Guerrilla. But he seems perfect to handle the gaming side, the software side of this equation. Hideki seems like he's been with PlayStation for quite some time, so it seems like he would have been perfect for the CEO role, as in terms of the same way Jim Ryan was. Terms might not have worked out too well perception wise for Jim Ryan, but Jim Ryan was very successful in his role.
Yeah.
Regardless of what we think about him, he just was a terrible speaker.
Right. Well, that's my only concern about Holst is that I don't.
He's
know
pretty good though.
I know, but I don't know how much charisma he has to kind of get people fired up and stuff like that. But
the few times he's done the press conferences and that we've seen him, and he's done some of the showcases.
Yeah.
He is a very passionate speaker.
Yeah.
So I think he will do just fine there. A little bit of an accent, but that shouldn't be that big a deal because again, you feel the passion when he's talking about stuff. But for the most part, he will be the face, I feel for PlayStation, which is the thing that they desperately needed because Jim Ryan, savvy business person, was clearly with PlayStation for 25 plus years for a reason, but he was not a good speaker.
Right.
And also, when Jim Ryan would talk about playing games, you just didn't believe him.
Yeah.
And it sounds silly that, as, video gamers, we're we want our CEOs to play games, but it doesn't fucking hurt.
Right.
To have one of the people in charge being able to play games. So Herman Holst talking to the community, I feel like more people would be willing to trust him and give him a shot than they would Jim Ryan. You know, the how do you feel about two CEOs though?
Don't care.
Like, so my whole thing is like I don't know many instances where multiple heads have worked out long term, but this could be.
I don't know. To be full disclosure, Michael, I think I got 5 or 6 people in my company that are super important. I don't know who they are. So like,
yeah,
and I work for a privately owned company. So
I'm just like,
I know who the owner is, and I'll never see him.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where when I look at how PlayStation used to be, where the reason they turned into Jim Ryan is because they had too many cooks in the kitchen originally, because Europe was independent.
Yeah.
You know, America and Japan were independent, and then also you heard about issues of like the reason the PS3 was such a mess is because you had hardware and software people not communicating whatsoever.
Yeah, I just
I'm
see,
wary,
I see this
but
very similar to the Leyden House thing that worked very well.
for a little bit, but then it didn't when disagreements started to happen, and then someone left the company.
Yeah, I mean, more than likely, to be honest with you, if I really had to guess, Hideki will probably leave after PS6 comes out. Like, he's probably spearheading the PS6.
Yeah, and that's why he's hardware.
Yeah.
Like right now, it's like we need someone just focused to launch new hardware. The only thing that like it concerns me is the things we talked about earlier with Xbox, where they have currently like 3 people that are in charge, and there's like a lot of different messaging going around. So I just hope that these two
I never
have a hell of a working relationship.
Personally, I never want to hear from Hideki.
Yeah, outside of investor calls, like he can have investor calls, but like when it comes to just upfront, they just need one person.
Because they really shouldn't be talking about any other hardware, like for a couple of years.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I do think we might hear about the Pro.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you count the Pro?
No, that's not.
Okay. If you don't count the Pro,
I don't classify that.
But
as
the
new
Pro
hardware.
seems like something that you would have hosts probably just do.
Right.
Yeah, but when it comes to new
about
hardware,
it from a developer standpoint, look at what we can do with this, versus talking about what it's going to be and what they're innovative, like the ergonomics of the controller. I don't want hosts to talk about that. That guy can talk about that.
I do like though that like you have host who's going to bring that Western philosophy, and then you do have a Japanese person in the other part of it, and that's kind of a thing that PlayStation's kind of lost with like Jim Ryan in charge. Is PlayStation
European only?
Yeah, no, that's what it felt like, you know. And Herman Hulst actually did have a statement to where I didn't put the quote in here, but basically talked about like PlayStation at its core is a Japanese company and studio or business, and I think that's important for them to maintain that identity, and they were losing that under Jim Ryan. So I think having like these two in charge is a good idea from that standpoint, because you kind of get a little bit of every philosophy mixed in. I just really hope their communication with each other is on point, because it is not evenly, but like it is divided, and we can see where the boundaries are. So it's just a matter of like, will they be able to come together and like be cohesive? Is a thing that you would have to worry about in these situations. But can they both handle the work that they were given? Probably. It's just a matter of, is it going to like work out in the end? That's my only concern. But yeah, PlayStation has a direction just in time for their showcase that could drop at any time, because people keep saying it's sometime this month.
Yeah, I think we'll get the announcement before Memorial Day.
Yeah. And it'll probably be
June
what
10th,
do you think, a couple days or a
10th,
week?
Or no, it'll come out. We'll get the announcement before Memorial Day, and it'll be before Summer Game Fest.
And it's just going to be a Concord state of play. Because
without looking at a calendar right now, June 7th to the 9th.
Here. Let me look up Summer Game Fest and see if this lines up with you, Dave. Hold on. Summer Game Fest is June 9th.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
June 6th to the 8th.
Yeah.
What day of the week is June 9th?
Oh, actually, it technically starts June 7th and runs until June 9th. So it would still fit in with what you're saying. And June 7th
Okay, I take it now that I see it. It'll be on the 5th.
5th. Okay, so
5th,
that
5th
Wednesday
6th.
before.
Yep. So it'll get announced between the 22nd and the 24th of May, and it'll be between the 4th and the 6th of June.
Okay. Okay, I could see that. That's plenty of time for them to announce it, and then get out of the way of Nintendo when they do their thing.
Yeah.
Which we didn't even have time to talk about, like people figuring out the Nintendo hardware by tracking shipments between Nvidia and Nintendo's
I
warehouses.
didn't even know what that was. All I know is that the new paper or that remake of Paper Mario comes out next week.
It does. You should probably pick that up.
Yes, I will.
But yeah, that's it. PlayStation seems to have people in charge again, and hopefully that will lead them to a better direction. And Xbox is on fire, and hopefully they figure their shit out. And I didn't include that like 6 or 7 companies laid off a bunch of people in the past 2 weeks.
It's and the other thought that's super interesting to me that I'll talk about probably next week because is I think I sent it to you and then I posted it in our Discord is like I want I want Jason Schreier to go to like Wayfinder and read another book just about this game.
Yeah.
So they pulled it from Digital Extremes. Like they separated themselves from Digital Extremes, similar to like Bungie Activision years ago, and they've delisted the game and they're re-releasing it.
Yep.
Like they're like, okay, whatever they did, we're undoing. Like
yeah, we'll talk about that next week because I think I saw more Wayfinder stuff pop up in the last day or so.
Yeah, I posted something in Discord today, and then I am gonna, if I remember, like Skill Up. I don't know if you know who Skill Up is, and he's like an Australian video game guy that does. He has like a massive interview with Airship, I think.
Okay.
So like. I pay attention to this studio because they're a Darksider studio, and I really like Darksiders. And the head of the studio, Joe something, like he's the guy that I had to talk to when I saw Darksiders Genesis, and he's just a really really cool dude. And I think ultimately he's what we want. He's like, I just want to make games that people want to play. He's like, I don't, like hopefully they make money, but if they don't and people have fun with them, like, so it's super interesting them splitting from the Digital Extremes publisher who made that other crap, that PS4 game that came out at launch. It's on PC now. I can't think of the name. Warframe. There you go. Yeah. So
I was hoping you would get it.
I was getting this close. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's a super interesting story that I want to dig a little bit more into. So.
Yeah, but Dave, that's all the news I have, and you might as well just take us home. We'll talk about playing launcher next week.
We're an hour and 15 minutes into this anyway. So, I mean, ultimately, I didn't really see anything delayed. Tons of stuff
just
unfortunately canceled.
Yeah, just canceled.
And I really didn't play, and the randomness of stuff that I watched is not super important. So
I played some things, but I would need a little bit more time to talk about them. Then
so please let us know your thoughts on everything that's going on. Like send us some comments using hashtag AskDigitalDays, whether that's in the Discord server, on the Facebook group, in the Twitch comments, in the YouTube comment. Put a comment in if you're listening on YouTube. Tweet them at us, any of that stuff. You can tweet at the main account at Digital Days Pod. You can tweet them at Michael at the First MJC. You can tweet them at myself at Good Dave Hunt. The Facebook group is posted in the show notes. The Discord server is posted in the show notes. Please go ahead and put some of that stuff in there. Give us your thoughts. Give us your opinions. I would love to read some of that stuff on the show, and Michael and I can have a conversation around that. Stuff coming up in the next couple weeks, like I just mentioned, Paper Mario and the 1,000-Year Door, I think is what it is. That's coming out. We got a ton of hardware to cover.
Dave's got to run to the post office to split up some of this hardware.
I got so much stuff in the mail while I was gone. So there we'll be doing some of that, keyboard, mouse, headphones, a couple sets of headphones. So definitely some stuff coming down the pipeline pretty soon. And lots of stuff, lots of cool things happening as we're getting ramped into Summer Game Fest time and E3, quoted E3. So please, as always, like, what do you want to see us cover? How do you want to see us cover it? Do you want to see the return of shorts and TikToks and reels and all that stuff? And, in terms, like, do you want me to do a 60-second review of a keyboard, or you want Michael to do a 60-second review of a headphone? Stuff like that. Like, I feel like that's some of the media that you guys are consuming. So like, let us know what you would want to see or what you would be interested in interacting with. Other than that, I think that's everything. So I hope everyone has a great week and keep moving forward.
Don't be a dick.
I almost said don't be a dick for some reason. I don't know why.
That's okay. It's been 2 weeks, Dave. It's been 2 weeks. All right. Oh man.
All right. Check out OBS. Cool. All right, though. Those of you who are hanging out in the chat, thank you for hanging out, and we will talk to y'all later.